So are the Tories just like jelly when it comes to Europe, wobbling all over the place, not knowing quite what to say or when, and if they are, whose hands does it play into? In a moment, we're going to be talking to the UKIP leader, Nigel Farage, and the Tory member of the European Parliament, Daniel Hannan, Fox News' favourite guy. But first, let's speak to a rare breed of Tory MP. He's a pro-European who's not afraid to speak to the media. Ian Taylor, he joins us from the BBC bubble. Ian Taylor, in your view, is it conceivable that a Conservative government could offer a referendum on Lisbon, even if it had been ratified?
If it's been ratified, no. But otherwise, David Cameron's policy is clear, and I support it. There will be a referendum if it's not been ratified.
But he's not told us yet whether there would be a referendum if it was ratified. What's your view?
Well, in my own view, it will be ratified. I think Václav Klaus will actually sign it, and therefore we must move on. I mean, the reality is an incoming Conservative government will have a huge number of challenges, many of which will require us to work closely with our European partners. So we don't want to sort of pick fights with them now. We want to try and get an agreement with the centre-right government in Germany, which is very exciting and only just been elected. We want to work with President Sarkozy. We want to work with our Swedish centre-right friends and many others in Europe so that we can actually get some solutions and actually get our agenda through, because you don't get an agenda through in Europe just by banging the table.
So it would seem from what you say then that it would be inconceivable, in your view, for a Conservative government to offer a referendum on Lisbon if the treaty was already ratified.
Correct, because it's not in the government's interests under David Cameron to distract ourselves. We've got to pick the fights that really matter, and that means a huge number of domestic challenges which we're going to have to take on from this awful Labour government, and then a whole series of challenges in the wider world where Europe needs to act. I was in Washington last week. They're saying, what are you doing? We want Britain to be more influential in Europe rather than less. And that means actually, as the European Union has worked all the way through, influence, compromise, collaboration in order to get your way. You can't just say, we are going to do this. You've got to get friends and allies around the table. So we've got to start building those bridges now.
All right, thank you for that. I'm now joined by two arch Europhobes. Stay with us, Ian Taylor, though. We'll try and come back to you. With me, the man Fox News wants to be our next Prime Minister, but they don't have a vote. The Conservative MEP, Daniel Hannan, he's here with me in Manchester, and in London, the leader of the UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage. There he is too. Daniel Hannan, it is inconceivable that we could have a referendum if Lisbon's been ratified.
First of all, Andrew, I'm sorry to pick you up on this, but I really don't like to be called a Europhobe. I speak French, I speak Spanish, I've lived and worked all over the continent. I love Europe, and I think that the process of European integration is bad for the peoples of Europe.
Eurosceptic?
Right, Democrat.
Okay,
how about Democrat? How about somebody who trusts the people?
So what's the answer to my question?
Well, there is going to have to be a referendum on some stage. All my life I've wanted a referendum. I was 4 when we had the last one. I've never had the chance to vote. There have been massive transfers of power from Westminster to Brussels since 1975, and we need to ask people whether they agree with that. Now,
so will we have if Lisbon... We know you're going to give us a referendum if Lisbon's not ratified. Are you going to give us one if it is?
I think it would be silly, frankly, to have one on Lisbon at that stage. I think there's loads of other things which are much bigger diminutions of our sovereignty, much more deleterious to our national interest than the Lisbon Treaty. And
so
I would like to have
a
wider referendum. Well, I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm a backbencher. As you know, I don't always agree with our party leadership. But I'm cautiously optimistic that there would be a wider renegotiation of our terms of membership. There would be a referendum on aspects of policy that we wanted to take back from Brussels to Westminster, and that would be put to the people, because nobody under the age of 52 has had a vote.
Right, so we wouldn't get a referendum on Lisbon, in your view, if it's ratified, but we may
get a better one.
We may get a referendum on a total renegotiation of this country's relationship with Europe.
That's what I would like to happen, and I wouldn't by any means rule out the possibility of it happening under a Conservative government.
Do you think David Cameron, faced with massive debt as far as the eye can see, huge public spending cuts and possibly tax rises, and an unpopular war in Afghanistan, is he really going to do that?
Well, how about this? As a painless way of making savings. We are now paying the EU £10 billion a year. With that money, we could give the whole country a 2/3 reduction in council tax. So if we're looking to make savings, there's a pretty good way of starting.
Nigel Farage in London, I guess you think it's Christmas watching what's happening here in Manchester?
Well, look, I mean, we campaigned as UKIP for a no vote in Ireland. We wanted a no vote. It didn't happen. The big money and the bully boy tactics worked, and they got their yes vote. I think we're seeing the true David Cameron. You know, he's got away for 4 years with people thinking that he's Eurosceptic. And in the end, he fulfilled that promise. They left the EPP group. They now sit under Polish leadership in a new group. But it's not where you sit, it's what you do. You know, the very first act of the Conservative MEPs was to vote for the Euro-fanatic President Barroso. I don't believe Cameron is a sceptic at all. I don't think we've got a cat's chance in hell of him offering the British people the kind of referendum that they need. And I agree with Dan, post-Lisbon, let's have a referendum. Do we want to be part of a political union, or would we rather have a simple free trade agreement? I can't see that happening. And yeah, you know, we are fielding 500 candidates in the next general election. We actually believe that the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves.
So if you want a referendum, Daniel, vote UKIP.
I mean, Nigel's right that he and I obviously want to leave the EU. We think that EU membership is bad for Britain. It's
but you want to leave it.
Yeah,
you don't just want to renegotiate.
But this is not Conservative policy. So Nigel is right about that. There is a difference between those of us who think that we should be as an independent country and the official line. But I do think that David Cameron, to give him credit where he's due, has delivered on what he's promised. He has given the European Parliament something that it hasn't had in 50 years, which is an opposition group.
No, Daniel, you voted for Barroso. That is not opposition.
Parties pushing for a different kind of Europe. And I think he's a Democrat, and I think he sees the need to ask people their opinion on this.
Nigel, I could hear you wanting to react to that.
Sorry,
the floor
Dan,
is yours.
Dan, you're not an opposition group. It was only because of Conservative MEPs backing Barroso that we got the man back for the next 5 years, heading up the Commission, who was the guy that refused to take the no votes in France, the Netherlands and Ireland. I don't call that opposition at all.
All right, we're going to leave it there, but before we go, let's just go back to Ian Taylor, who's been listening to that. Ian Taylor, do you think there is any stomach in the Conservative Party for not a referendum on Lisbon, but a wholesale renegotiation of Britain's relationship with the EU?
Well, Nigel Farage runs a different political party, and of course he wants to distract the Conservatives from what they want to concentrate on. Why have a referendum on something where actually you've then got to go back to the other 26 members of the European Union and negotiate? Much better to negotiate alongside our friends, try to get a constructive agreement. That's the way the European Union works. I'm chairing in a few minutes Ken Clarke speaking on the European economy and how we can revive the European economy for the benefit of all of its citizens. These are practical issues where, frankly, we need to start working now with our allies, not alienating them by constantly carping on about referendums on this or that. Concentrate on the big issues, fight the fights where it really matters, and that means concentrating on some of the key things where Europe can be a real plus for this United Kingdom, not a minus.
Ian Taylor, just before we go, can I ask you, why wouldn't you come here and debate this issue around this table with Mr. Farage and Mr. Hannam, but want to be separate from it all?
I didn't quite hear you because a lot of noise behind me there, Andrew. But
I was just saying, why weren't you prepared to come and debate this round our table?
I'm prepared to always debate, but at the moment, at this conference, I'm just trying to make sure that we can concentrate on the key issues in front of us. And at the moment, Europe is a distraction, whereas actually it should be a positive advantage. And the Tory party's got to get real. All right. Ian Taylor, thank you for that. Thank you, Daniel Hannam and Nigel Farage in London.